Man, hopefully that worked. Okay, cool. Thanks for coming on the sabbatical saga. I've been told that I need to start doing introductions for people. I'm not too sure though. Like, someone said that I keep assuming people know things about people, but also simultaneously, the people who are listening are people who know everything about this person already. So, but I feel with you, it's kind of actually a lot of people might not be familiar because there was a time where I was
Right.
doing, um, where we were both in college, you were away in the mainland, whatever. Um, so yeah, I guess to contextualize this conversation, I think we met in junior high ministry when we were both around 13 in middle
Yeah.
school, if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
and then knew each other throughout high school, sort of served in church together, and then you went off to college, and I think that was it. I
That's
think
kind of
that's
it. Yeah.
yeah, okay, okay, and that's, I guess, the context for it. So for that person, that was the context of this conversation. He's actually not texting me. I should have put it on do not disturb. I don't know what's happening. Um, yeah. So I guess real quick, I'm curious though, like how you got plugged in initially. Like 13 years old. From what I understand, you weren't religious or didn't grow up religious. Like, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I mean, I could give you like what version? I guess maybe the quicker version of things is like my family, like they went to the church of the youth ministry that we were in.
Okay.
But it was more kind of like, I guess they were more ambiently like Christian, I would say. And then I like went to the junior high youth ministry like with a friend who like just brought me kind of like randomly, and then like I think it was just like like they it got me in at like the right time situation. But I also it's I
In what way
really
the right time? Like, were you like psychologically the right time or like
yeah, I mean, I think like, my childhood as like most people, I think like who grew up 2008 and after was just like incredibly like turbulent and like inconsistent. Parents were like so busy, and so like, and I also like similar to like a lot of people, like I don't have a lot of extended family in Hawaii, because I'd like moved from like Japan when I was younger, and my stepdad was like from California. So it was like a perfect storm of like, just being like quite like looking for something, and then also like happy to find like, a social environment that like I felt like maybe was a lot more like relatable to me than like my like school life.
yeah, and I think the crazy thing is I just remember you coming to the ministry, and I don't know if it's sort of just the novelty of a new person, but everyone was just head over heels for you in every way. Um Like, I think it was just, you had the, whatever, the haircut with the thing,
Oh
and
my
then
god.
like, the highlights and, like, full on scene kid, and I don't know, I was just like, "Oh, wow, that's so cool," and you did photography. I feel like there was, like, an aura around you that just came in, and it was like, "Oh, this person's so cool." Um, and it was just all of a sudden, and I felt that I don't know, was it not? Like, I feel
No, that's
everyone
so
just
funny.
did you not feel, like, super accepted right off the bat or
I mean, it was super fun right off the bat. Yeah.
yeah. I think yeah, I don't know. I just remember that, like, I remember, like, going on your Facebook or something and being like then seeing your pictures, and I'm like, "Oh, man, she posts such cool, like, artsy pictures." I'm like I'm like, that was really neat." But, yeah, I feel that you sort of found your rhythm in the ministry right away, and I remember 8th grade cuz you kept bringing your friends to the ministry, and I would then subsequently try and text them afterward, and
Mm-hmm.
hit on them, because I was a little weirdo, almost like without fail every single time. Um, but, yeah, I mean, I feel bad for them now,
Why?
having
I feel
endured
like
that,
that's
but,
so eighth grade.
I just remember that you had this sort of aura that people wanted to connect with at the ministry, but then from your school, you were bringing tons of people in constantly, and, I don't know if you remember that at all, or do you know why that was the case, that um you felt so, I don't know, maybe compelled to bring people, or like what was the deal around that? Or
I mean, I think a lot of it is like I knew what it was like to like feel lonely, and I think um a big part of like my current like work like like at this point in time is like also like deals with that sentiment, and I think like at that point in time like that was my way of like connecting to people and connecting people to other people, and you know yeah, I think that's like I think it like my life mission kind of birthed from that place and then has now like extended to like my life's work that I'm like doing at this point. But yeah, that was like the small seed, I think. Just
really,
yeah.
you weren't always like that, like trying to bring people into something, or
I mean, I think like so my family like always tells me about this memory of me like when I was very young, like maybe like 3 years old, and I would like run into the living room and like tell everyone like this is my family. They're all like 40 plus or 35 plus, and I'm like blowing a whistle and saying like everyone get in a single file line. We're gonna do this thing together. And so like it's kind of like been an inherent like part of like my personality, but I think like I don't know, yeah, at the time, especially in junior high, like I think I just like people had a need, and like in that moment I was like, oh, like plugging them into ministry like feels like the right thing to do.
yeah. So I mean, did you ever? I'm curious about this because other people now, 10 to 15 years later, sort of feel this way, where there was maybe a feeling of, one person was actually told, if I recall correctly, like, the blood of your friends is on your hands if you don't bring them to church. Was there that sort of sentiment around it, or was it more sort of fun and
I was I worried about our eternal or the state of our eternal soul, like maybe a little bit. Yeah, but there was like a little bit of that, but mostly like I think I just like wanted to have fun with my friends.
mm,
um and but I also was very like serious about like ministry, but also like very serious about play. And so like those were like two truths that I had like simultaneously. Like I was thinking like, we're all gonna go to hell if we don't do this, so like let's get it together. But also I was like, we have a walking taco, don't you want one?
dude, I want a walking taco right now.
I think about it all the time.
Walking tacos? Dude,
Yeah.
honestly, um, yeah, I miss that. I miss that era of Uncrustables and, walking tacos just every
Yeah,
whatever, Saturday night, whenever that was, I don't even remember.
I think it was
Um,
Saturday night.
I feel like you just got with the program though pretty, like, easily, like you were saying, like, you really dug in deep, you were serving fairly regularly. I saw you as sort of this fervent Christian, and what do you think was happening within you at that time? What was resonating with you at this moment, going from someone who is not particularly church to just full blown, not evangelist, but you're sort of bringing people in. You're consistently serving in media. You're doing all these different things. What was resonating with you at that time?
I mean, I think like I don't know, like I think in secular society, like there's a big disconnect in terms of like the I don't know, the spiritual reason why you would like be doing something, or like, I think like that was something that I was like constantly like frustrated with even as like a really like young child. And so like I just, yeah, I mean, I just really wanted things to mean something. Like just wanted like I don't know, yeah, I guess I've like never really thought about it, but it just felt really like natural. I didn't think that hard about like jumping in or like serving. Like it just kind of was like this thing that happened, and then it just snowballed. Like not in a negative sense, but like, I'm like I'm coming to youth ministry. I'm hanging out. I'm helping like kind of ambiently, and then all of a sudden I'm like, helping with like training like as a high schooler, like training like like middle schoolers like how to like, be in ministry. And like it just like there is like a really intense like timeline where like so much happened at once. And I think like, there's obviously we'll like get into it later. There's like a lot of like pros and cons, but like I think a really big pro at the time was like I think people like were able to recognize like maybe the things that like I was good at that like wasn't necessarily being like held and like valued like in like my school life. Um and like also like just in my like secular life in general. So yeah, I think that's like kind of the gist of things.
It just kind of naturally came out of these interactions that you're having on a sort of day-to-day basis with the friends and connections you're making in church. Is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah, I think there's a lot
well, I
of
mean,
that.
and we don't it's not like there's no structure. Like we're kind of just having a conversation. So I mean, if you want to get into like I mean, it sounds like there's sort of these positive things that are happening in the background and these seeds being planted in which you're sort of cultivating this gift um of that you kind of carry with you today of bringing people in, hospitality, friendship, etc. um it sounds like though in the background maybe there's these other sorts of like seeds of maybe discontent taking place at the same time, or I'm
Yeah, there's like a little bit of it. I think it's funny now that I've like had distance and like been able to think about like a lot about why like I was there in the first place. And I think maybe more than I realized, like I actually took like the word very seriously. Like I was not there to mess around. Like I was
mm,
like, I want to be to the book, or not to the book, like, but I want to like be a Christian in like a true sense of the word. But then like, yeah, I mean, we're like in middle school, high school, so obviously this is gonna happen. But there was like so much drama and things, and like a lot of like hierarchical like issues, and like also like there were moments where like I almost felt like my like personhood was like being like questioned, or like a lot of like, like things that I was like I think how I'm living is like consistent to like the word I'm reading, but then like a lot of times like there's just, there's a lot of people interpreting one thing so there's gonna be so many different opinions. But um, I think that was like kind of a struggle I had consistently, where I was like, I felt pretty sure of like what it meant to be a Christian and what that looked like. But then that was like always being challenged by like people who maybe thought that they knew better about what that looked like. Um, so like it is interesting to like look back and realize like I recently went to church for the first time in
No
like
kidding.
years. Because I made a friend who like attends a church here in New York, and I just like was like, sure, I'll come with you. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I don't think I ever stopped like believing in these things, and like I don't think it ever stopped like resonating with me. But I do think like the like echo chamber like ministry environment of it all was like honestly the biggest thing that like caused me to like step back and be like, I want to like figure out like what I really believe and like who I really am as a person. And so yeah, that was like a very recent like realization I had.
Interesting. So, do you? I mean, what was it? Was it sort of a similar church to
Yeah,
what? Oh, really?
yeah,
Interesting. So super evangelical vibes.
yeah. I was kind of like, okay, I'm definitely like not evangelical. I kind of was like, maybe I should check out like the Presbyterians or something at some point. But um, yeah, I was like, I don't think I stopped like believing in this like thing, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, it was funny. I went and I was like, okay, this evangelical vibe is like not for me still. Like that's still like a fact of the matter. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I there's a DoorDash that just came for Taya right now,
Oh,
and it
you.
was like happening in the background, and I'm like kind of pissed because I don't know why they knocked. Like they were supposed to just leave it, but it's one of those things where it's like I don't want to see them. But then like
They just
no,
wanted to let
not
you
not.
know it's
It's fine.
there.
I've DoorDash before, make a couple extra bucks here and there, but I'm like just leave the thing. I don't know why they needed to knock. And then I'm like, oh crap. Like I was like going through a moment. I'm like, Taya's like answering the door by herself, and I'm not listening to Ayaka enough. I'm not focusing enough.
It's
I'm really
okay.
sorry. I got
No
distracted. It
worries.
won't happen again. Um, um, we might hear it. This mic's pretty good though, so we probably won't hear it.
I don't think I heard. I
But oh
didn't
my
hear.
gosh, it's so that's I mean, people are gonna get really upset that I didn't talk about this thing about you going to church recently. Um, so, but what's going on in your head while you're going to church? I was really curious about this. What oh my gosh, I was about to go on a tangent. I'm really curious about what you think about like aesthetics around evangelicalism as an artist. We'll get back to that though. I'm really curious about that. But tell me more about this time of going to church recently. This is like last week or something?
This was like maybe 2 months ago. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, so the friend I went with, she's like recently a Christian.
Okay.
And so in some ways, maybe hanging out with her, I feel like I'm like looking at a mirror of myself like a decade ago. And
As a
oh
sorry?
yeah, like it felt kind of like I was like when I met her and like I went to church with her, I was like, oh, this kind of feels like looking into a mirror from like
Okay.
a decade ago. But yeah, I mean, like the the evangelical vibe of like we all gotta like get all of New York City in these
Okay.
stores, and I was like, all right. And then it was like a lot of like conversation about like, or the sermon was like about revival and like all these things, and I was like, okay, I'm not sure like how I like feel about those sentiments exactly, but there was a lot of talk about love for like fellow man and like those things, and I was like, okay, these are like values that I like resonate with and I
Mhm.
still like practice today. And so like there were moments where I was like, I'm in this, and then moments where I'm like, ooh, I'm not in this at all.
Interesting. What were those moments? What do you think, like, triggered that in you?
I think like, you know, I mean like the fact of like you walk into a church and people interact with you pretty immediately
Yeah.
positively, which is like something I just try to do on a day-to-day basis, but usually that's like an output I have and not necessarily like an input I'm like experiencing. Because
That level, like, you're used to giving that to people, but you're not necessarily used to receiving that level of hospitality immediately.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, and it was like there was like a woman who was like in her 40s, like waiting in the bathroom line with me, and she was like, "Where's your lip gloss from?" And like, like we're just really like, I was like, "Oh, okay, like I'm back in like a church." And so like these interactions like felt really good and like positive. And even like during worship, like I was like, right, like this is like it's structured in a way that like gives you time to like reflect and like think about things, and you kind of get in this headspace that like you can't really access in your day-to-day life unless you're like carving out time to do. And then like yeah, I think the doomsday clock on salvation like type of like energy like maybe that's like the thing that makes me feel a bit
And
like
is that, like, altar call or calls for
yeah, oh yeah,
repentance
yeah,
or
yeah, like you save your soul now, and I'm like maybe people need to think about it, I don't know like like.
it's a big
And it's
decision.
yeah, and it made me realize like also like my prefrontal cortex is like fully developed at this point. And I was like, and I haven't been in that environment like it's since it was like developed. And I was like, oh, like people are kind of running on like pure adrenaline here. And like I'm sure like the spirit does move them, but it's like, can you distinguish like like when I was listening to you and Quinn's conversation,
Mhm.
um, and you were like talking about how like that one kid was like, I want to, I'm
Dude.
being called to be a pastor.
Yeah, okay.
Like that was like the kind of vibe where I was like, okay, like like I was like, there, it's not invalid, but also like what is like actually going on here, and like just feeling really interested in like dissecting that a little more at this point in my life.
Dissecting what exactly?
Like I guess that like what exactly is that like, not like formula, but what would make that kid like feel this way,
Yeah.
and like yeah, like being like, I mean, it's interesting, like my feelings about like ministry and also like my feelings about like being an artist are like very similar, where like I don't believe in like superstars, or like I don't I don't believe in like celebrity,
Mm.
and like I think serving and like making should come from like a very like pure place of like love for like fellow man or the natural world. And so like, it is funny when like the first impulse you have is like, I want I want to be the person like doing the sermon,
Yeah.
which is like cool. Like I mean, I want to be a professor at some point. So like it's not like I'm like void of like those feelings, but um yeah, it's just like it recalled back to a time when like I was in ministry and there was like these secret like undertones of like power, like hunger that people weren't necessarily like aware of, like on the front of like the consciousness. Like people were kind of like subconsciously like moving in this way, which like caused a lot of strife at points. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I don't, I mean, it's as you know, Taya thought I went way too hard on that one kid. Like, and there might have been a little bit of a racial insensitivity by the extremely moke accent I gave the kid. Um, I get it. That is insensitive. I understand. The kid happened to be moke. If he sounded like me, I would have done that voice, just really nasally and annoying. But I don't think it's necessarily fortuitous that young men such as that young man and myself, our whole lives were being told this is the most important thing. This is the end all. Why wouldn't I devote my entire self to this thing? My career, my education, everything should go to that thing. It's the most important thing one can do. And, for me, that's what I ended up doing. I don't think that kid did it. I haven't heard from him since. I don't even remember who he was, to be honest with you. But I prayed for him that he would become a pastor. So perhaps that will come to fruition soon. But um, yeah, I don't know. It's our whole lives were sort of based around this thing, and it's not a coincidence that we all wanted to keep the thing going, especially the guys who were having a really good time and saw a path for them to stay in it and to stay a main character, I guess, in it.
yeah,
Um, and that is interesting about what you're saying about celebrity, because that's exactly how I felt about a lot of the folks that I grew up around in the
yeah.
church. Um, I remember even Nalu. I remember Nalu picked me up from my house and I was just like, "Oh man, like no way. This is crazy. Like you know where I live now? That's so crazy." Like I don't know. Or I remember I played Halo with one guy, and one of the singers showed up, and he's telling me how to play Halo, and I was just like, "Sure, man. Yeah, whatever you say. This is how you play Halo now." I don't know. It felt like Superstar. I don't know. That
hmm
it was kind of unhealthy. Yeah, that's curious. How does that sort of play into how you view artists, and that's interesting.
I mean, I think like some people naturally have charisma, which is like totally fine. Like I think people should like take up space and like be loud and be charismatic. That's like not necessarily like something I have a problem with, but it's more when like I think it's difficult when like you feel like, or how do I say this? It's like your soul's at stake, and also like you want to serve in the best way possible. You want to do things right, but you also just like really want to like befriend this person that's extremely charismatic. And so like, there is this like, and like this happens in like every kind of social environment, and like especially like in the art world too, where like I think maybe people have like a personal conviction about like what, like I don't know what their interpretation of the word is, or what like their interpretation of like what an artist's practice should look like. But then like there's just someone who's like super cool and you just like want to be their friend, so you'll just kind of like be like, uh-huh, yeah, sure, and like and just like follow them around. And like I think when maybe you don't have like necessarily like a strong like foundation yet, like that can really like affect the way that you like if you it's like very simple. Like if you don't know yourself really well yet, then it's easy to just like get carried away by like, another person. And so there were like, and I think young people, especially in the time that we were in ministry, are like just like like sponges. Like they're very susceptible to things. And so while that can be like a really good thing, to like be eager to like learn and just like, you know, like just be all hands on deck about things, but also like like you can just be easily like manipulated or just like lose a sense of self like really easily.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like, it sounds to what you're describing almost sounds like a cult. That's, people who don't have a strong sense of self, they're sort of underdeveloped psychologically, perhaps have gone through some trauma, so there's just this level of dissociation that when you come to encounter someone who doesn't even necessarily have to have that, but can feign that in some
Hmm.
way, in a meaningful way that touches you, um, I don't you sort of lose yourself into that person. And I saw that in myself and the people that I thought had it figured out. And then I quickly realized, like, oh, you're maybe even worse off than me because not only are you immature, but you think you've got it figured out.
Yeah, well, I think like maybe that was like the distance I felt where like I kind of was like not like super comfortable, but maybe a little more comfortable being like I'm constantly like questioning and like reevaluating and like I like have like healthy degrees of like separation from things. Whereas like I think, some others of like our peers didn't necessarily like have that. But then sometimes it put me in this weird position where they're like they like, I think especially after I left like to go to college, like um I was like hearing like through the grapevine that a lot of people were saying like, oh, Ayaka is, and this was the vernacular that was used, sketchy like
Oh,
now and like things
interesting.
like that. Where yeah, it was like, there was, I think there is like a lot of judgment, but that is like coming from a place of like someone like just people who don't know themselves very well yet. And so if someone else is like trying to figure it out, maybe stumbling through it in the process, like, but being like brave about it, I think like it's easy to point at that person and be like, well, that person's messing up, so it makes like me feel better about like, not taking risks. Um, or that was like how I interpreted it at least.
That you were taking risks.
Yeah, I mean, just like really putting everything on the line, like putting myself out into the world to just like really try to figure out like who I am and like
Yeah.
what like what exactly I believe in. And like I think the conclusion I've come to at like this very young age of like 29 is that like I actually don't know anything, and I probably will continue to like come to this realization that I don't know anything. And that's like what feels good, but that's like that goes back to like how I was feeling even when I was in ministry, where I was like constantly like feeling strong in my faith, but also constantly questioning things, because I like wanted to like really understand like what I was reading and like believing.
Yeah.
But then like that could be interpreted as like, oh, like my faith is like weak, or like,
Mm.
whatever. Um, and so what I did feel, it was strange, like you were saying, like I did feel really like quickly accepted, but also like maybe in the back of my mind, like I felt like I was like constantly like being challenged because I was like, like actually thinking critically about things,
Yeah.
perhaps. Yeah.
And it just begets more questions as you learn these things, like, "Oh, why? What is that? What purpose does that achieve?" I mean, yeah, no, I think that's just a reasonable thing to think about when you hear how radical or sometimes unbelievable things are in scripture, theologically, whatever. Um, I'm really curious about that time of going to college because I, like, I guess, did people reach out to you during that time? Or, I mean, as you're hearing this behind you, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get into the drama of it because I'm just sort of like curious though, because I think the average Christian that hears this, that had no sort of development in the last 15 years, might go like, "Oh, she went to college and lost her faith." You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And I think that's a fear that we all had for all of our friends who were going off to the mainland and really did take those risks and tried to explore who they were and how they ought to be in the world. And I don't know, like, do you see it? I guess, I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous question to ask. Like, if you see yourself as sort of this, like, oh, I just went to, a liberal institution or whatever, and then got indoctrinated. And like, but I guess that's sort of the, like, what people would think when they hear that. But I don't think that's a fair thing to sort of assign to that experience. I don't even know if there's a question in that. I think I'm just sort of speaking out loud about this thing because I just find it unfortunate that it's clear that you in high school were someone who is very devout and very fervent in their desire to discover, maybe generally speaking, the transcendent and themselves and their interaction between themselves and what is transcendent. Um, and to not see you going off to college and sort of going and learning and doing these things is maybe an extension of that experience, perhaps. I mean, is it not? Or I don't know. I don't even know if that was a question. I don't think it was. I think I'm just sort of riffing because, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I
Any
mean,
thoughts on that?
it was like, but it's like kind of the narrative that gets threaded, right? About like, oh, you go off to school and you like lose your faith. But as time goes on, like I also am like realizing like life is not so like linear in that
Yeah.
way. And like I wouldn't say that my like faith necessarily looked exactly like it did in like high school or something, but and there were periods of time where I was like, maybe I don't believe in a god, or like, like maybe we're all just here randomly and there's no reason why. But I think it has kind of had this full circle moment where I'm like, okay, like maybe I'm not necessarily like interested in like participating in like a really like dogmatic like practice.
Hmm.
Um, but like I do feel like this imminence of like, you know, feeling myself through the world and like, feeling like a spirit that like embodies like all things around me. And I think I'm like, that sounds like God, like and like I do kind of I don't I mean it's funny. There's like a whole trajectory. I did a lot of like religious studies in undergrad actually. And like, you know, I like took reading the Bible very seriously like when I was in ministry, and like that like propelled me to like this like other trajectory of like really getting into like Western philosophy and like, but then through Western philosophy, like kind of horseshoeing back around to being like, oh, like faith and hope are like actually the most important things about like being like a human. And so like I view that as like not like there's no pass fail, but like a success story of like, just departing from something and like coming back full circle, maybe in not a way that I initially like thought, but like really like being able to prove to myself through my life experiences, um to being like, no, like I think like these convictions I felt as like a high schooler, middle schooler were like real. But I think like, with whatever, like culty mindsets or like capitalistic, like linear, like timelines, like it just didn't look productive to people maybe.
What that's I'm curious about that connection. So this sort of I think we've referenced The Alchemist on this before, but sort of like a Campbellian hero's journey type deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what convictions in middle school that you're talking about or in ministry do you feel have been constant or maybe have been recovered, circling back to, 29 from 13 to 29, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I remember like I had a map of like I think in middle school. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a map of like persecuted people's like a country map or something. It was like some kind of like really intense like evangelical like ministry that was like distributing these things. But like I felt so like deeply about like just humanity as a whole and um like really feeling really strongly about like loving fellow man and like like I used to do these things where like Valentine's Day I'm handing out spam recipes that I made to like homeless people like like handing out like hygiene kits and like that was like something that I was like doing in like high school, middle school, high school, and like I think maybe when I first went off to college, like I was like reevaluating my relationship to like niceness and like kindness, and like realizing I had really complicated like feelings towards like just being kind in general because like also like I was coming from Hawaii where people are just generally kind and then going to like a like a liberal arts institution where like most people who go there are like wealthy white people, and like they're like I don't want to share and I was like dang you guys don't want to share like it was like a very like cold hard reality of like is this like every man for themselves like maybe I can't survive as like a person who's kind and like loves fellow man like maybe that I need to obliterate that part of myself. And so I lost that for a hot minute, but then within the past like 5 years, I'd say through teaching actually, because I teach ceramics but other art things, it came back and I was like, this is what I loved about like ministry is like my love for like people. And I'm glad it's back because I think I was like truly missing like a big part of like who I am as like a person throughout those years that I was like just trying to like you know like resting or BF my way through life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a tough thing when you get to the mainland, and I think that was a sort of a rude awakening for me coming to the mainland was that just culturally, it's so different and weird and unfriendly, and especially when you're in higher education, elitist and I don't know. It's just I'm glad to be away from it now as much as I wanted to be around it for so long, but um I don't know. It is, it does make you miss the sort of simplicity of those relationships that we cherished during those formative years of our life. Um, I guess I feel that there's this sort of narrative elements to your story that we've spoken about before. Um, but I'd be kind of interested to hear your thoughts now. I feel the sort of motif of gender in your story is quite pertinent to the whole thing. And I even just hearing sort of like how you felt perceived going off to school, sort of doing your thing. I feel like it plays a big role. And obviously, I don't know, we can kind of get into this. I had a sort of apology that I sent you a while back. And then I
Oh.
don't, it means less now if I share it on this podcast, but I feel like it is relevant because it's sort of part of the story. Um, I was we okay, I guess we ran into each other at a coffee shop
Mhm.
2 years ago, and you and I got to talking about just church, sort of gender dynamics in church randomly after not speaking for the last probably 8 years. I don't know at that point. This was 2023. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a while. I probably haven't seen you since 2016, maybe. I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, it was just crazy. I honestly, in the moment, I was sort of shocked that you were even receptive and happy to see me, maybe, because the night before, someone had reminded me that how nasty I was to you, like when we were younger, and um, I was thinking about that pretty much the whole day, the following day, and you left, and I sort of turned to the people I was with, and I was just like, it's so funny because someone brought up how nasty I was to Ayaka when we were growing up, and one of them said, like, you should just apologize for it, like, you're clearly holding on to it, just move on. And so I sent you that thing, kind of just remarking at how ironic the situation was, I guess, that we were talking about misogyny in evangelicalism while I was just a huge jerk that was extremely rude to you and to hitting on all the girls that you brought to the ministry. Like, that irony is not lost on me. I get it. Um but I don't know, you were like super charitable about it too. But I don't know, just a irrelevant story to bring up. No, but yeah, I don't know. And there were even times I remember this one time, there was this one girl who started coming to the ministry, and everyone thought she was really pretty, and she was objectively really pretty, but I just negged her the second she walked in, and you slapped me across the face.
Oh
I
my god, wait, really?
it was like what the heck? Like, where did that come from?
Wait, I
Um
don't
it was pretty good though. I deserved it in the moment.
remember. Oh my
But yeah,
god,
I that was the kind of energy, but you were um but I don't know. I feel that those gender dynamics sort of play into your story. Like, you um are someone who is constantly bringing people into the ministry, like, one might think of I don't know, some biblical character, the woman at the well, Lydia, Phoebe, whatever. Like, someone who's like responsible for bringing these people, but not necessarily like doing the evangelical work. Someone who's serving constantly and like putting all their energy into this thing. Um, and then someone who goes off and becomes sketchy, and it's sort of like pariah. I don't know, because at the same time, and I don't know, like, not to keep talking about myself constantly, throughout high school, I was being sketchy, and I was like doing just being like not being involved, not doing anything, not going to church. And I don't think I really got that sort of, it was just like, oh, he's
Mm.
just just being one rascal, like, I don't know, or whatever, but I feel that there's just, like, a different expectation around not just you, but women like you.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is funny. I like never really thought about like I've thought about like misogyny in general within like evangelical spaces, but like I think too like it's really site specific to Hawaii, where like it's just like such a like, oh well my son's doing his best, and then it's like my daughter better have all the ducks in a row, and that's like baseline, and I think like that was something, I mean, not just like within ministry but in life in general, like struggling a lot with like feeling like I had to be exceptional at every single thing I did. And like I think in yeah, one time so one time we were just like setting up pre-ministry. Not you, it was like me and a group of other people.
Mhm.
And like, you know, I'm kind. Like I am very kind and generous. Like that's something I know about myself and like confident about. But one time like I just wasn't being like nice for no reason, and a guy, like a boy, just turns to me and says like, Ayaka, you're kind of mean, huh? And I was like, me? Like, like I was like,
That sounds like
whoa,
something
whoa,
I would
whoa,
say,
whoa. Yeah,
but
I mean, I know if like I and that was like another thing. Like I know that I could be like maybe like slightly like aggressive or like challenging at times, but like it never came from like a place of like wanting to like harm people, and I think in Hawaii that's like also generally like a like sentiment people have where it's like women have to be like this soft smooth thing without any like edges and obstruction, and especially in ministry it's like you have to like really just like honestly be like quiet, and like I'm very naturally loud and like expressive and like have opinions, and I think like were it be like I was like a boy in ministry, like that would have been celebrated, maybe been encouraged to like become a pastor or something. But I think like, and I remember having conversations with like other girls about that where like they were like, oh, like being a pastor is something like I'm interested in, but like I don't know if that's like my place as a woman. And then like reflecting back on those conversations, I'm like, what the heck was that even about, and like, but so much has changed, like even just like even secularly about like how we view and interact with like gender dynamics. But yeah, also it like referring back to like your apology and like nastiness, like I truly like don't even remember like that much of it or like any of it at all. Like, so I mean I was very grateful that you like apologized, but it truly, I think it just got washed out in like the noise of like other people who were just kind of like echoing the same sentiments. Like it was less about you as an individual and more as like that was just like the song of the times, like where people were just generally like, I don't know, like very like the surveillance I felt on like my behavior was like really intense, I'd say.
Mm,
Like I would get called in a lot for like, what do they call it? Accountability checks or something.
probably. That sounds about right.
Um, and they'd be like, "What's going on?" I'd be like, "What is going on? You tell me." Like, and it took me a really long time to actually like deprogram myself from that like way of thinking. Like I'll be navigating life like without a physical person like taking me aside and being like, "What's up?" but then like in the back of my mind is always constantly like hearing like a voice that was like that's too much, or you're taking up too much space, or you're being too rough or aggressive. And
Is that
so
what you were typically being called? I mean, not to like pry, but I mean, is that what you're typically being called in for? Just being brash or
no, I think I was being called in for some funny things. Like I also, my whole life I've just been like friends with a lot of men, and like have had a lot of like close friendships with like men my whole life. Um, and that's like something I got called in a lot for. Um, even if, I had no intentions of like romantic involvement or anything. But even if I did, like I don't think that like is something I should have been punished for necessarily.
yeah,
Um,
I think one of the things someone mentioned to me was I brought up purity culture and they're like, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" And I guess for people who aren't in that world, um well, I guess how would you like define sort of that um milieu of purity in late 2000s, early 2010s evangelicalism, you know?
yeah, I mean, it was so like it it ranged from like one like chiller end of the spectrum was like your shorts are like too short, to like the other end of the spectrum, which was like you cannot be alone in a room with like a boy ever. And like just yeah, like evangelical purity culture is so specific in the sense that like it almost feels like they implant a bug into your brain where they're like any thought you have like directly gets transmit to God, and then you'll like get struck down for it. And that's like kind of the narrative that like gets built around like just like any type of like behavior or thought that like strays away from like the strict rigid like it was almost like don't show your ankles like kind of vibe, where I'm like, guys, it's like 2015, 2014, like we're gonna show ankle. Um, and yeah, it's I mean it was like a lot of like condemning others for not like behaving the way you were behaving, which is like a more simplistic way of like putting it. But like if someone was like there was like a range of people who were like oh like I don't date, and like I'm dating for marriage. Um, and then and then these people oftentimes would be like shaming people who were like exploring romantic relationships, but like not necessarily for this like end goal of like this union at the end. And like I was like, we're 14. There's no way we should know these things. But it was like that culture made it feel like my soul was on the line just because like I had a crush on like someone's brother, you know?
I you know, and for me, I guess I'm a very scrupulous individual in that when I was 14, it's like, "Oh, yeah, we only date to marry, so I can't date." And obviously, I'm just raging hormone teenager. I I think that was for me what caused me to lash out, especially towards women,
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
can't date you, so I will just, like, be a huge jerk to you," I guess. I don't know. Um, yeah, which was really unfortunate, and I mean, I took that out on my relationship even with my guy friends who even if they sort of hinted at having a relationship with a girl, or held a girl's hand. Obviously that was something that did happen. Like, guy held a girl's hand, and I was just like, you're such a terrible Christian, you suck. God hates you. Like, what? Where is that coming from? But it was just this insecurity in me that was manifesting itself in this really anger and resentment and contempt that I had, because I couldn't enter into that willing. Like, I was just too scrupulous to really think about doing that. Um, which is really unfortunate, because even the dynamic you're describing in which that behavior is policed, it's sort of heavily women that would be disproportionately affected by such a thing. Like, I mean, no one cares if a guy's shorts are too short. That might be like a gag or something, like,
Yeah.
oh, that's sort of funny. So and so wears short shorts. I remember even at one of the camps, maybe you were there for this, I don't know, but they made a rule that girls had to wear rash guards or something at
Yeah.
the beach or at the pool. And I think one of the girls said, "Okay, make the guys do it too."
Yeah.
It's like, it's a reasonable request, I guess, in light of
No,
these
like
things.
just no nip for anybody, you know.
Right. I mean, if they can't, then um but yeah, I think that disproportionately seems to affect women, um which is, I don't know, interesting. I think it kind of goes to show that, like, someone like you goes off to college and it's just like, oh, she's now gonna be like wrapped up in the world, like sort of a damsel in distress in the um liberal academia of whatever. It's I don't think people would think that way towards a guy. I think it would be like, oh, so and so went off to college on the East Coast. That's really cool. Like, oh, they fell away from their faith. Oh my gosh! Like, pray for him or whatever. I
pray,
just,
pray for
I,
him.
I just think the vibe would be different, and I don't know. I think that's maybe evident in your story, which is unfortunate. Um,
I mean,
I
yeah, it brought me to this point. So, as unfortunate as it is, like I'm glad I'm here, you know.
yeah. So I guess even when you were talking about church, it's kind of interesting. I just noticed that you weren't immediately like bashing the idea of spirituality, God, the transcendent, the Holy Spirit, even. What do you sort of see? What is different in your belief system now? How would you describe that, I guess, now? Not to make it a dogmatic sort of thesis of what you believe, but I am just curious, because it does sound like you have some beliefs that still resonate with you that, I don't know. Well, maybe I'm just drawing assumptions. I could just let you talk and say what you think about that, I guess.
No, yeah, it is true. Like I think I have come back to faith in like such a like it's a very singular thing to me in terms of like my belief system's just kind of this like collage of things that have worked but like for an example like within like my art like studio practice like I was actually reflecting on a lot of like these little rituals I have and they kind of go back to like my like ritual of like doing like my daily devos like doing like and the way I like convene with others is like very small groupy and like I mean in terms of like my belief system like like imminence is like a big word that like comes up a lot. And like just like this like feeling like within myself that I am connected to like all of humanity, but also the natural world, like through this force that is like bigger than us, and like also doing like I don't know, there's just like so many tangents. But yeah, like doing a lot of like religious studies in undergrad, and like but also like I recently like I recently went to like the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and they have like a lot of like things like they have a lot of artifacts from like oh my god, what's it called, like cathedrals and like things like that. And um just like looking at like I don't know, the things that have like moved like humanity to like make it's like I think society as a whole has like our art has gotten worse when we stopped believing in God like collectively. Like we used to build cathedrals, and now we build like, you know, like box gentrifier apartments to be destroyed in like 20 years. And I think like we live in a like secular society is like void of faith and void of hope. Um, and so like when I see that, like, you know, I like I don't know, I just can't help but think like this isn't this isn't the way things should be, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was in Montreal recently, and I went to the Cathedral of Notre Dame there in Montreal,
Wow, yeah.
and, we went for mass, and they don't let you take pictures. You have to if you're going for mass, you're there for mass. You walk in, you can't walk out during it. You're there for 1 hour, you're sitting. Um, but yeah, you, like, sit there, and every single pew, I mean, obviously, the cathedral is just insane, but just this little detail of every single pew had a face carved into the end of it, or these just certain level of intricacy that does come with sacred art, and you do see this disillusion of it. I mean, I guess you'd know better than I, but it would seem that like in the 20th century, with the departure from God, moving into secularism, the introduction of fascism, like you start to lose all these types of ostentatious levels of detail that go into architecture and painting and music, and it just becomes very um, modern in the sense of just like convenient and
Yeah,
palatable, and it achieves something. Like it's a means to an end,
yeah.
design. That's why I was really curious about what your take was, as an artist, of the aesthetics of what we might call the seeker sensitive evangelical movement. And for people listening, like seeker sensitive was this movement that um, really comes out in the late 20th century. Um, Figures like Bill Hybels, Willow Creek, Saddleback. You can look these up if you want, folks. But uh, 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 creating environments in which the upper middle class can sort of approach uh, evangelicalism and the Christian faith in a more easy and palatable way. I mean, it's a very simple way, 30,000 view of it. I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts now, like, in your artistic journey, and like looking back, like, what are your thoughts on the aesthetics of evangelicalism?
Yeah, yeah, evangelicalism does have an aesthetic. And I mean it's very utilitarian. And like I mean it's kind of like the Starbucksification of faith, I guess. And like yeah, I think the thing that resonates with me about like cathedrals and things, like for an example, like that Dali Cathedral that they're like still building. It's in Spain, I think.
Oh, the
But
Sagrada Familia. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that is something that like transcends a single like lifetime of like building and like work and like labor, because like of their like dedication to like eternity, and also like their like dedication to like man, and like it's so, like that feels so much more convincing to me that like there is like a spirit here, and then I like, you walk into like a big room with four walls and like a bunch of chairs, and then like the graphic design isn't bad, but it's just kind of like just it's like,
Derivative.
yeah, it's very derivative. It looks good for the sake of just like being in this like slideshow, and you're kind of like, is this really like, is this really it? And
What do you think that communicates? I'm curious because you're touching on, um, sacred art. Obviously, I'm Roman Catholic, and like the like Sagrada Familia, the Cathedral of Notre Dame. These are institutions that have, yeah, took hundreds of years and required thousands of years of manpower basically to put these things together, and this imaginative spirit. And you're saying it's sort of communicating the sense of eternal and transcendent. What do you think is communicated in the evangelical aesthetic?
it's, I mean, it's kind of like, you better get saved like right now, dude. Like, like
Interesting.
it's or it's very just like this is palatable, and like you don't have to think about like the hard parts of like what eternity means. Like you can just like download our app, and it's sick, and like it'll be fun. Like going to church will be fun. And I think that's like, um I mean, this goes off like this other tangent, um of like a personal belief of mine, but like I don't think everything should be positive all the time. Like I think the negative is like part of like the sublime experience of like getting closer to something that's like outside of yourself. And I think like evangelicalism is like, I would consider it like an overly positive space, just in terms of like it tries so hard to like be relatable to the extent that I'm like, okay, but does this actually like, I don't know, does this actually communicate like what's like really at stake here? Which like I think that's like, it's, yeah, it's so interesting that you're like Roman Catholic now, because like I also, I've come back. I When I was like extremely evangelical, I was like those freaking Catholics. But then now I'm that tradition has endured for a reason, and I was doing a lot of deep dives on like dress, like Catholic, like like garments,
Mhm.
and like the way that the Pope's garments are like made like by really specific person, and like that is like the story of like how things made is like just as important as like to the process as like all, I don't know how do I explain, it's like everything is so considered. And I think with evangelical like visual culture, it's just kind of like graphic on a t-shirt, like that's like
Yeah.
kind of the vibe.
What do
And
you
if
think is at stake though? Because I think that's what you really touched on that, and that's kind of interesting. Like with the Catholic aesthetics, there seems to be more at stake, is what you're saying. Like, you have the concept and the sort of artistic tradition around like a memento mori, for example. It's you wouldn't necessarily see actual human skulls lining a church,
Mhm.
in the sort of evangelical tradition, but you do in the Catholic tradition. So these huge concepts of life, death, virginity, sexuality, like huge spectrums are covered. What do you think is at stake um, in the ascetic tradition of evangelicalism?
I I'm thinking about it and it's just really hard for me to like really parse through what their values really are. Um like I don't know, evangelicalism a lot of times just felt like this revolving door of like we just got to get people in here. But like yeah, I don't know. It just kind of was like I guess it's a very American like way of like seeing like spirituality, I think. Like there's like I don't yeah, I don't how do I explain? It's like quantity is almost like more important than like the quality of the thing that's happening. And like yeah, I'm actually like at a loss like thinking about what's actually like being like communicated in those spaces right
And
now.
it's interesting. I mean, you say it's American, and I do believe that it is like fundamentally um, American. Um, yeah, certainly like capitalistic sort of I don't know. What is that called? Like service economy? What is that called? Like third wait, I don't even know. Um but there is this sort of clear like American footprint around it, but at the same time, I think it's easily exported to anywhere. Like I
Yeah.
remember I was when I was in grad school, I was doing like English tutoring, which is literally just like calling someone up in another country and then you just talk to them in English, which is pretty fun.
Mhm.
And I remember this one woman in India. I think she was, I don't know, how do you say it? Hyderabad? I think that's what it, yeah.
Mhm.
And she's there and she's like, oh, I go to, um, you know, so and so church. And I was, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Are you like a St. Thomas, Syro Malabar Catholic, like this tradition of Catholicism that
Mhm.
comes out of St. Thomas going to Kerala, India in the first century? And she's like, what? No, I go to whatever, like New
Uh-huh.
Spring, such and such, whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, boom, regular, like, we're playing Hillsong, we got lights, we got slides. And I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, you are in the middle of India and it looks exactly the same. The same,
Yeah.
like I'm like Googling it as I'm talking to her. I'm like, what is this? But I mean, you sort of see that blueprint everywhere. And even that, I mean, it sort of speaks to that level of commodification of religion. You have this thing that can get sort of tied up really neatly and sort of experienced or consumed anywhere, and maybe even disregarding the context in which it is being perceived, which is in a sense sort of colonial and weird, but seems to be like received well in those communities, like in Japan and India and Pakistan and places that have historically struggled with um, the Christian um, tradition. Why do you think those types of like Eastern communities might resonate with something like that?
Yeah, well, I think it's like kind of like it parallels like the way that like there is like a globalized like aesthetic culture. Um like you could, like, for an example, there's a ton of boba places in New York City. I know that they look exactly the same in other parts of the world, like, from Taiwan where it's from, and then they probably have a branch in like Thailand, and like it's gonna always like look exactly the same. And it's like it's a bit like Apple Store esque where like you know exactly what you're getting every single time. And I think like the more like increasingly like the more globalized like the world gets, and like there's also like and it is like this whole thing, but like visual culture now is like so like homogenous because of like social media and like how like synced like visual culture is like across the globe, that like that actually doesn't, going back again to like the visual culture of like Catholicism, like you need like quiet and reflection and like maybe like an isolated like time to like think about things for you to like really like generate like a visual language like the ones of like cathedrals. um but like just now people don't even like images like get consumed like so quickly, like if you're scrolling and you look at a photograph, like you're not really processing everything that's going on. And so at this point it's like what it what the image now wants to do is like to catch your attention. And I think like evangelical aesthetics are like very good at that, where it's like they know how to like make a graphic that's like gonna pop, and then you're gonna be like, oh, I thought this was like an ad for a coffee shop, but actually it's for a church, and then like that gets you through the door. Which like I think is like very like smart in some ways, but um yeah, I think like it's like very consistent with the way that Starbucks is like a globally like accepted and even like celebrated like entity that like people like attach like 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 positive like sentiments towards. And like I think just like the evangelical aesthetic is very similar, where it's like really relatable, like easily digestible. um and like at this point like it could really work anywhere because like everything is now kind of like looking the same and like homogenous.
I mean, it's kinda interesting, like, it seems like what you're saying is that the aesthetics of evangelicalism ironically signals that it's offering nothing of significant value, but maybe this sort of fleeting infatuation. Like, I think of some, there's a devotional practice of Visio Divina, which is as opposed to Lectio Divina, which is this sort of like meditation upon scripture from Lectio. But Visio Divina being this prayerful meditation upon typically some sort of visual art like paintings or whatever. Um, and you think of some great religious artwork, like I've done this exercise with Rembrandt's Prodigal Son, or um, I think I've done it. The Calling of Saint Matthew. I can't remember who painted it, but it's these artworks that are these pieces of art that um, are drawing you into an even deeper reflection of the meaning behind it. And in so doing, like drawing you to the divine in some, I mean, that's like the
Mhm.
whole thing, I guess, behind like iconography. Did you study that at all? Like iconography when you were
A
doing?
little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm not super familiar with that world, but it's been like a contentious topic in Christian history in the past.
Oh,
But um it's I mean, it's fascinating because it's like drawing you, the ideas that it's drawing you to that saint in some real tangible way, and not obviously just to this like whatever oil on a canvas or whatever,
Mhm.
um I don't know. That's I don't know. That's interesting. This is a incredibly like based conversation we're having right now that you like you're coming off as super based like Catholic art, Catholic aesthetics, bagging on globalization, like I don't know, like who are you? Is this Ayaka or is this like Alex Jones or something? I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't know. Just super based. Um yeah. Any critiques about
I mean,
No, okay.
yeah, I have my critiques on every type of like system, but um yeah, I don't know. I think when I was in art school early on, I was like, and my work now, it's still like not, I'm not like making these monuments and like, oil paintings of like biblical stories, but I think when I do see these works, like it it just like, I don't know, you can tell that the person making it was like thinking about something other than themselves, or else like you wouldn't really push yourself to make like a perfect painting, like I think in general in life, like I think if you live for yourself, that's like a closed like loop, and it doesn't like, it's not very like generative at all, and I think that's like kind of the issue with like contemporary society, with like most people live in this closed loop where it's like they're just trying to generate like what like hope would be able to generate like for them like within themselves, and like art kind of falls flat sometimes when like I can see a painting and I'm like, okay, that person like just kind of didn't think about much, which is fine, like that kind of art can exist, but I think you know I know some freaks, and they're like, they have their very specific like spiritual belief system, and like, but they're like so connected to like the divine, and like when they are working and like talking about things and moving through things, like you can really tell that it's like not really about them, and like it's like a similar thing to like cathedrals that take like hundreds of years of building, like they're making work, like sure, like in the moment they're just drawing something because it feels good to them, but at the end of the day, like they know that like what they're making is like connected to like this legacy of like humanity that like will transcend their like more mortal like life on earth, um and that's like what makes things meaningful, so I don't know, that was like a tangent, but I think
No, I think
yeah.
tangents are welcome. Um, I don't know. I think I've kind of addressed a lot of the questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, is there anything that I mean, I guess you have you it sounds like you've listened to I'm surprised that you listened to the episode with my brother and whatever. That's awesome. I don't know. Was there anything you were expecting to talk about that we didn't or talk about or touch on that you wanted to touch on and we didn't touch
I
on?
mean, I think, I mean, there's like the obvious things of like, I think there was a lot of like like trauma and like feelings of like rejection that like happen in the church, but I also almost think like that's just like a universal like part of being like 14, and I think it was like obviously magnified through like the lens of feeling like my soul was on the line, but like I don't know, it's funny, you're like, it looked like exactly what it was, which was that we were all in middle school, high school, trying to figure out what it means to exist at all. And then like just trying our best, and sometimes our best was like not that good. But that's like totally fine because that's like what the whole like purpose of like salvation is, I guess. But like yeah, it was fun. I mean, there's like things where I do have a lot of people where I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I could speak to them because of like a lot of the work I've done personally to like kind of get to a point where I genuinely like have forgiven a lot of people who felt like I felt like had caused me harm. But there are a lot of people where I feel like I couldn't have spoken to like 5 years ago.
I wanted to ask you about that. Okay, this is something actually like as you were logging on, I was trying to find it. This might be a bit sensitive, but I remember you posted something. I don't even remember what it was. Um, but I remember the people I was with when you posted it. I guess the vibe, and I don't even know if I like saw it or not or whatever because I don't even remember what it said. But the vibe was sort of like I'm moving on from this part of my life and these relationships. And I think in the moment, I remember being with two people and they were like, oh, like, I guess that's it. Like, that was our relationship with her and it's sort of gone. Do you remember that? And I don't know. I was trying to like dig it up and I don't know if it was like what era that would have been, but I remember them
Yeah.
even posting on like your Facebook or something or trying to DM you afterward and they're like, "We still love you," or whatever. I was just kind of curious about like
I kind of like ambiently remember this, but I don't remember it like crystal clear. But I do. I mean, there was like a really big like chunk of my life where I felt like a ton of like resentment.
mm,
And like I think that resentment was like I think it was like necessary for me to like completely like step away from people for a time in my life to be able to like let them back in again. But yeah, I don't remember what I said. I do kind of remember something like that
okay.
happening. Um, but I think it still probably was more under the sentiment of like I don't agree with certain ethics of like this particular dogma. Um, and like yeah, yeah, I think I mean I definitely like was very angry about things and for a while like felt extremely closed off to like any ideas of like faith, but that was like connected to my like resentment towards like people.
Mm,
But once I was able to like disconnect, like not disconnect, but you know, kind of parse through like what I was actually exactly feeling resentment towards, which was just like how I was like treated in certain environments, but not necessarily like my relationship to like spirituality. Like that wasn't the problem. It was more just like I was in a really intensely like surveilled like community that brought me like so much joy and also like I think that's what made it difficult was like this, you know, we had such a cast of characters and it was like so
yeah.
fun. And I truly like there are certain friendships that are like foundational to like my understanding of love. Um, but it's sad because I think like there were also like a lot of things that happened that like kind of made me feel like it was circumstantial to like not like it wasn't about me as a person that they like wanted to connect with, but like it was more just like a circumstance of like the condition of my faith or something. And that's like what felt unfortunate. But I think everyone grew up a little and now we can like be friends and like hold like space for like ambivalence and like everyone can have different like belief systems, but for a while it just like really felt like you were in or you were out. Um, and that was like really hard for me.
Yeah, I mean, as I've been doing these episodes, some people have approached me and pointed out that, oh, it's kind of clear that you have an axe to grind. I don't necessarily have an axe to grind with any individual person. Um, I want everyone to like come on the show at some point. Like I really do. I really hope like every single leader, every single pastor, I would love for them to come on and to talk to them. I do clearly like have an axe to grind because I am fairly uncharitable. But like I think I'm very uncharitable towards like these institutions that foster this culture of um surveillance and policing gender and sexuality and purity and like toxic spirituality, like masquerading as sort of like guardianship. Like it's
Hmm.
I think I do, but like I don't know. Like I think it's, yeah, and I hope that's how it comes off to everyone. But it is this like system, honestly. It's like a systemic thing that like I'm surprised still resonates with people. And that's why I want to talk to people who are like still in it, because it's like, how are
Yeah.
you like still in this? Like I don't get it. I don't like how like it's
Well, I think a lot. I'm trying to recall like what kept me in that were like maybe negative feelings I had, and a lot of it was like a very like culty headspace where like if I lose this, I have nothing because my whole life and world was like built upon like in this community with these people. And I think like especially for, I mean, everyone experiences fear, but especially for people who maybe like don't have like a strong like familial like foundation, or like maybe they have like a complicated like relationship to family or whatever. Like I think when you lose like that community, like it can really just like feel like it's the end of your life. um and I remember feeling really really scared of like leaving, and like I was so unsure of like how I was ever gonna just like find like people again. And like also feeling really like scared and like avoidant when I would like run into like people I grew up in ministry with in public when I was like home from school, because I was like I like so desired like to feel that closeness to you again, but I know that there are things that like you would immediately condemn that like would prohibit you from like just seeing me in the same way that you used to. And so like I think if that's like too uncomfortable and like too scary, like you're not gonna like, no matter how bad it gets, like you might just never leave. And I think like maybe that's like one thing that I would like want to encourage people to do is like, like not like life is serious, but it's not that serious. And like I think you ought to like just try, like very simply just try. And I think your trajectory is like so like cool for me to watch, just because like, you know, like did you grow up Lutheran? Is that correct?
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
grew up Lutheran, and like just to like contextualize it, I grew up in a specific denomination within Lutheranism, because Lutheranism's fairly liberal depending on what. I grew up in the most conservative synod, they're called, of Lutheranism, where you couldn't pray with other Christians, including other types of Lutherans, and there was a
Oh
fundamental
my
belief
god.
that the papacy itself was the Antichrist. So
Wow.
yeah. So that's
Wow.
like
Okay.
just to contextualize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were like Lutheran, and then you were in an evangelical context, and then when did you go into like Roman Catholic tradition?
While I was in grad school, I was like, um, just there was a lot of things. I feel that um it was actually my devotion to scripture that led me to become Roman Catholic. Like I felt
Mhm.
like in order for scripture to make sense to me, um I needed to become Catholic. And I mean, you kind of I actually in the beginning you sort of touched on it. Like the idea of interpretation really became that issue became very pertinent for me because the idea that scripture is this lone authority in one's life is extremely problematic because what happens ultimately is that the interpretation of scripture becomes authoritative. Like scripture is a
Mhm.
book, right? Like I
Yeah.
can pick it up and um outside of a context it makes no sense really. um and that's what I kind of began to realize is that like um this scripture functions and this is it's there's a theological philosophical tradition. For anyone interested, it's called post-liberalism. It came out of Yale Divinity School. But this idea that scripture functions as a script to be acted out. Um, and and what I realized was that, and it was really my devotion to the Hebrew Bible because what I was in grad school, I was particularly interested in Hebrew Bible. I was studying Hebrew. I was doing Hebrew exegesis, and I was thinking that I was going to pursue like a PhD in Hebrew Bible. I was taking like extracurricular Hebrew reading courses. Like
Mhm.
I wasn't that good, and my writing sucked. But, like, I don't know, I was, like, coming in from Hawaii, had no idea what academia was like, so I was just like, "Oh, yeah, people get PhDs in Old Testament, whatever." Um, but, like, I realized that the Hebrew Bible, like, belongs in a liturgical tradition, like a
Mm.
worshiping community,
Mhm.
and it's meant to be sort of like constantly acted out and practiced within that community, and it's clear that that's like how it's written. um
Mhm.
and and I'm like studying scripture in this sort of post-liberal tradition, and I start to think about like, oh, does the entire Bible function that way, like including the New Testament? And it's like, okay, well, what do you do with a passage like John 6, Christ saying, unless you eat of my body and drink my blood, you'll have no part in me. And
Mhm.
everyone leaves. It's like, well, like, why do they leave? Well, it seems like pretty early on, the Christian tradition believed in the real presence of the Eucharist, or, like they didn't think of it being like symbolic, or
Mm.
something like in the opening of Revelation, John talks about having a vision on the Lord's day. And it's like, okay, what's the Lord's day? Well, that's Sunday. That's the Mass. Like he's celebrating Mass and he begins to see this vision of heaven and earth colliding. And that's what's taking part in the liturgical tradition of the Catholic Church. And I'm like, okay, like I don't know. Like it came to this point where I'm like, okay, this is true. Like this is like, and not necessarily that it's true. This is the truest form of Christianity. Like
Mm.
it's
Mhm.
it's this. Like this is, if you're going to be Christian, this is what you have to be. Um I could be this or I could be nothing at all. And honestly, like that thought crossed my mind because I've like devoted my whole life to ministry and to like further education in ministry. and then it's like, oh wait, um, like like now that's getting pulled out from under me because it's not like I'm gonna be a priest. I've been married for, at that point, 7 years.
Right.
So, um, okay, well, this is true. So I'm just gonna commit to it. And I don't really know anything outside of, um, like, my Christian faith. So I'm just gonna go all in. And
Hmm.
that was basically it. Um, so yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like I think that there was a lot of like risk taking in that process as well, and like being like honest about like you're like following your conviction about things, which is like you know something I struggled with a lot in the beginning when I like was in ministry, where like I was maybe more similar to you in the sense that I was like, I'm so dead serious about this. And like I want to like interpret this correctly. Which I think like is funny that my tangent became like philosophy. Turns out I just really like reading. No. Uh, but also like but then there's like also people who are just like in ministry or like in faith for like more of just like a vibe situation, which is like totally fine. But I think like it is hard when like you're all kind of clumped into a room and you're like, okay, well, we're all neutralized and like all the same and we all should behave in the same way because we're like reading the same thing. And yeah, like I think like I don't know. I don't know if I would really do it, but there are moments where I'm like, well, I wish I was born like a few hundred years ago and I could have just been like sitting in a monastery, like making like an illuminated manuscript and just like
Bro.
really thinking about things, like and like trying to like make this like visually ornate like thing. Which is funny because like I think in my own way, like that's what I end up doing. But like I think like that kind of focus is like something that's like really lacking in like contemporary society. And so I don't know what the answer is, but like people have to focus on something, and I think like if not faith, then something else. But I just don't know what that like. I don't know what is like what is important to people. I guess that's like something that I struggle with, and I think
Yeah,
I
I mean, it's
always
kinda like
struggled with.
the I mean, not to be trite, but like the Bob Dylan song, like, "You gotta serve somebody." It might be the
Yeah.
devil or it might be the Lord, right? Like, there's this, like, um, this idea of the, what is it? The homo religios or, like, homo religio, like, this sort of innate desire, innate nature within what it is to be human to ultimately assign worth and, attention, whatever, value, to something. And so, like, and maybe it's a false dichotomy, I don't know, but it would seem that, like, you choose the good, or what's good, true, and beautiful, or um and even then it's like you are everyone's in pursuit of those things, but it's just like a little off, like
Yeah.
everyone's pursuing God, like, even amidst sin,
Right.
they just don't know. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think that's very Thomistic, in the same vein of Aquinas, that we're all trying to worship God, but we just maybe don't know how.
Yeah, and I think like people like I don't know. Like when you think about like the life of like, a monk or a person that inhabits like a monastery, like they're not thinking of their life linearly. They're not like they're just kind of like doing the thing like every day. And like, but I think now, like, there's like this timeline that like everyone thinks they have to follow, and like they get so distracted by the timeline that like they become completely like unaware of the fact that like, in this life, like everyone's actually just like looking for something, and like trying to like reach towards something. And I don't know where I was going with that, but um yeah, it's I don't know. I think feeling lost is okay, and I think like even within like ministry, that was something that was like not always like embraced, which was like the feeling lost and like questioning. And I think like,
It's uncomfortable. I mean, when
yeah.
you brought up monasteries just now, like I think 2 years ago, I was working, for the Catholic Church, and I was just sort of having a crisis. I really, like, hated where I was at, and the relationships were getting strained, whatever. So I spent, like, a week in a Trappist monastery, and,
Mhm.
Trappists are,
I
like
love the draft.
the
Yeah.
Trappists are yeah, Thomas Merton, my boy. Um, Trappists are, the most sort of, like, they're, what is the word? Oh my gosh. I'm like so out of like Catholic spaces right now, but you don't leave. You're here. This is where you are. This is where
Yeah.
you live. This is where you sleep. This is where you eat, where you work, where you're gonna die eventually, where you're gonna be
Yeah.
buried. Like this is where you are. And when I went there, it's very uncomfortable. Like I remember um also the design of it. I was at Mebkin Abbey, which is actually the guy who made Time and Life magazine. He actually like donated a bunch of money to the Trappists, inspired
Whoa.
by Merton, and ended up donating money to make it happen. Whatever. Not even Catholic. Really interesting. But I'm there. It's very like austere. It's very plain. It is kind of in that like modern brutalist
Mhm.
thing vein. It's very uncomfortable. But like the sense of like time and comfort, discomfort, it's weird.
Mhm.
The this one French theologian refers to like those monasteries as like the thin place. It's the
Mm.
place that, where like heaven and earth meet. But like I don't know, like heaven, people have this like idealized version of heaven, but heaven is so like confronting. It's so uncomfortable
Mm.
because you're faced with like holiness and
Right.
pure divine power, and that's like uncomfortable. Like that's because you find yourself in that and you don't really know what to do. And I was so like uncomfortable there the entire time. I really did not enjoy it. I was looking for every excuse to leave,
Mhm.
honestly. And I eventually did. I left like a day early. I was so like, oh, get me out of here. But
Yeah.
like, I don't know. That's that like desire in people, like the stillness, the quiet, the solitude, it's I don't know, but the regiment, they also don't talk. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, they don't
So you
talk.
don't talk
Yeah.
really,
They all
that's
wear the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just it's cool. They don't eat meat.
They
That
don't eat
was
meat. Yeah.
no, yeah.
They
They're
build everything.
they would yeah, what's that? They build everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, I these guys, they're old. They're old. I don't know if they're building anything. They're farming
Yeah.
mushrooms.
Yeah.
Um, that's the thing. We need to pray for vacations. Everyone needs to pray for vocations to make sure they get people. Um, they're no, they're great. But yeah, it's like the regiment of it. I'm like, I don't know how you like build relationships there. They wake up at like 3. I don't know
Yeah.
what that was all
I
about.
mean,
I think I got up at like 5. I got up for like the later prayers because the call to prayer
yeah.
was at like 3, and then you go back to bed. I'm like, nah, I'll just skip that one. We're gonna just do the start our day off super early anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was interesting. Yeah,
I think
but
that discomfort is like something that like I feel like lately in my life, if I hit a wall of discomfort, I've been trying to just like sit with it. Because I think like I've just in life been trained to like be like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I need to like do something about it. And I think like the traditions of like, like I mean in an extreme sense like the Trappist, but just like I think a lot of like more traditional like Christian like um what's it called ritual like it forces you to be in a state of like discomfort, and I think like maybe evangelicalism like lacks a little bit of that, and maybe that's like, and I think a lot of my life I was like in the state of like thinking that everything needed to be really positive all the time because I had like just come from like an evangelical context. But then yeah, you go and like you see the way that like monks live and like other like Christian traditions, like there's a lot of discomfort and like
Yeah.
everything's like not always great, and like a lot of like, and asceticism is like a big part of like that tradition. And like I don't know, like I think maybe evangelicalism has this thing where like it's like you can still like have an iPhone and look at TikTok and like also like have salvation, and which I'm not saying that's like not true, but I think like if I don't know, like if you're someone who maybe is like much more interested in like really understanding like what it means, like what like transcendence is, and like like maybe you can't be watching TikTok for 5 hours a day. Like I don't know. Like it is interesting. Like I think evangelical like culture just like wants to make Christianity cool, but like maybe it's like not like cool in the sense that like contemporary like people understand cool to be, and like but also like maybe that's okay. Like I don't think everything needs to be cool. Like some things like can be kind of like weird and like traditional, and like make you feel a little uncomfortable or like take you out of like your daily like headspace. So I'm not saying everyone should be a monk, but I am saying that like there should be a little part of like that ritual in every person's life, I think.
I think it's interesting. The ascetic tradition really seems to be resonating with a lot of folks. I know this is kind of going long. I'm sorry, everyone. But I'm really enjoying our conversation. And if you have to
You can
leave,
cut
that's
it
fine
down,
too.
yeah.
But like, I'm like, yeah, ascetical traditions really are kind of interesting. I actually knew someone who was on doing this one. It's kind of a famous like Catholic fasting challenge. It's called Exodus 40. Super cringe, rad trad male energy. But people were on it who weren't Catholic that were just interested in sort of ascetic
Uh-huh.
principles.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like you do cold showers, you work out, it's these weird. I don't know. It's if Exodus 40 wants to sponsor this podcast, though, by all means. But um, no, I think it's interesting because young people are really gravitating towards Catholicism and Orthodoxy and traditional Protestantism as of late, and I feel mixed about that because I feel they're gravitating towards it because of these sorts of political ideologies that these traditions have kind of been
Mm,
co-opted by,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like it's weird to see like Catholic priests and bishops sort of like align themselves with certain like conservative figures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I don't know. It's like I don't think Catholicism is conservative or liberal. It's its own thing.
Right.
Um, and I don't know. That's just unfortunate. But like I wish that people were coming into it because of what's beautiful. And I think the weird thing is that like the rituals and the asceticism and like the tradition is the beautiful thing, like
Mm-hmm.
weirdly enough, but like you I feel like you have to come to it through a different way. Otherwise, you're just going to be like I don't know, like traditional Latin mass. Like it's like you can come to it because you're trying to be like super superiority complex or whatever, or you can come to it because it's like beautiful and it resonates with
Mm-hmm.
you and it's
Yeah.
otherworldly,
Yeah.
and it's like I think that's like the unfortunate thing about like traditional Christianity today, like the how people are coming into it. I mean, I'm glad, but it's like it's just like I'm ambivalent.
Yeah. It is. I do know a lot of people who they're like a really particular kind of, for lack of a better word, like bro that have like really entered like that Catholic space. And I also am just kind of like, I don't know what your intentions are there, but um I guess I'm glad you're like finding something. But yeah, it is like, I don't know. It's well, it's like goes to this other tangent that like we definitely don't have time for, but it's just like because I think traditionally right now, like men don't feel the like they don't feel like they have the permission to like express themselves emotionally. Like asceticism seems to be like a outlet for them to like express something, or like like that gives them meaning. But like maybe everyone should just be hanging out more. I don't know. Like it is like this weird like I flip flop where like everyone needs to chill and focus on one thing more, but also on the other hand, I'm like, what happened to hanging out? And I think that's maybe something that I really loved about evangelical culture was like we're just hanging out for hanging out's
It
sake,
was just
and
a
like
hanging out for like 6 years straight. I mean,
yeah.
like
So we were literally all just hanging out for 6 years straight, and that was sick. Like that was something I absolutely loved about that.
yeah. Maybe that's a good place to end it. Okay. I'll stop this and then I thank you for your time. You do have to hang around for a second so this uploads, but
Oh yeah, no worries.
okay. All right. See you everyone.